Crazy Ex-Girlfriend has come to an end after brilliant seasons of laughter and heartbreak. I'm Rob Licuria, senior editor here at Gold Derby, and I'm with the show's co-creator and star, Golden Globe winner and Emmy nominee, Rachel Bloom. Rachel, for 4 seasons, you've been a writer, creator, songwriter, star of the show, and I'm guessing probably craft services, makeup, lighting, all the other things too. Because it just seems like you just do everything, and it sounds really exhausting. Have you been resting since the show wrapped?
I have. I mean, we did a thing that most TV shows don't do, which is we have a live element. And so we wrapped the narrative show, went into the final episode, which was a concert special, which had a whole new production team. We wrapped that, went back into editing for both the narrative and the concert special, wrapped that, went to Radio City Music Hall, wrapped that, and then I went to London with a skeleton crew. So now I'm back.
Oof. Like, seriously, you must be exhausted.
I've been sleeping a lot. It's very nice.
So what's the secret to 4 successful years on a show where you have to wear lots of different hats? Like, you have to have some serious stamina, but there's got to be more to it than that.
I mean, I think what makes it easy is that, in a lovely way, what choice do I have? I mean, like, if I don't go to set, the show doesn't get made. If I don't look at the scripts will get written without me having feedback on them. If I don't write the songs won't get written. So there's just a certain, there was a lovely lack of free will that made it easy to have so many hats because you were so under a deadline.
Yeah, that makes sense. Talk us through why you thought it was the right time for the show to come to an end.
We pitched the show as 4 seasons. We pitched it as 4 cycles. We really pitched it like a 52-hour movie. And it was always just, it felt right. This story was always in 4 phases. It was always about denial, admitting you're in love, rebelling against that love somehow, and kind of finding this dark night of the soul, and then coming out of it and starting from scratch. And that was just what it was.
Yeah, the coming out of it and starting from scratch part of the cycle, I think, is what was actually really profoundly done. And
thank you.
I want to drill down into some of the elements of the last season, because for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, this show is incredibly funny, but there were moments that were actually quite heartbreaking because it touched on a few nerves that I think a lot of people can relate to. And so let's talk about, for example, this show focuses on outsiders and people that don't fit a certain mold. And I love that quirkiness and individuality was so celebrated by the show. What are your thoughts on that aspect?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I think that everyone on our show not only proved that, like, over time they didn't fit the mold. I think that was on your end. Not only like there was no character that ended up fitting any particular mold, but also even if the people who fit in don't think they fit in. And that's just a universal lesson that you just kind of learn, and it extends beyond this show, is everyone kind of feels like they're on the outside, or if they're on the inside, it's human nature to fear being on the outside. There's a certain tribalism to it. And I think that the more specific you get with characters, the more relatable it gets, because people aren't these vague ideas of an ambitious woman who's great at everything, or the perfect guy who has no fears or anxieties. People aren't badly written. People are made of specificities. And so what I found in creating a character that was specific to some amalgamation of me and Aline Brosh McKenna, we found so many people who relate to her. And it makes you realize, oh, I'm not, in a wonderful way, oh, I'm not unique. I mean, for me personally, oh, I'm not alone in being a short-waisted, big-breasted girl of a secular Jewish upbringing who loves Harry Potter and musicals and has some sort of combination of anxiety and depression. I've met thousands of people like that now.
Yeah, I know people, so many people like that.
Yeah, and so it's great because you realize your problems. Sure, it takes away a certain kind of hubris and I am me and I'm so special, but in a good way, it makes your problems, oh, the insecurities I have right now, a lot of other people have. And part of what is hard about any insecurity or anytime you're sad or taking it up to mental illness is feeling alone and feeling like you're weird and the only person. And chances are that's just not true.
Yeah, that's so comforting, you know. Um, Speaking of that and how you're trying to kind of get to this place of authenticity, the show also does not shy away at all from mental illness. And as fun as over the top the show can be, which is a lot what we love about it, it's also really grounded by that to some extent. So how difficult was it to get that right, authentically and honestly, and also balance it with the humor?
The show was always about deconstructing stereotypes. And it was always about a character, watching a character from her point of view. It was always starting with her point of view, which is why the show wasn't called My Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. It was the way she sees herself and the story that she tells herself, and seeing what she's like inside and seeing what she tries to be on the outside. And I mean, at the end of the day, when you talk about mental health, you're talking about happiness and wellness, and that's one of the central things the show was always about is who are you, what do you want, what's going to make you happy, as opposed to the things that you think should make you happy and the story you tell yourself about what box you fit into. And then as far as always playing Rebecca, because we had empathy for her and empathy for the characters always, I played her. There was never anything I did that I felt like I was labeling her. I was always finding the reason for everything she did. And the more fucked up her actions got, the more it had to come from a place of fear or sadness.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The other main takeaway, apart from some of the funny stuff that we'll talk about in a sec, is how the show shines a light so beautifully on friendship. And I've always said, I know I've interviewed a few people from the cast, and I've always said everybody needs a Paula in their life. And some of the bonds between these characters, I see them as being aspirational. What do you agree with that?
Yeah, the show, I mean, the show really came about from me meeting Aline. I mean, it started as a conversation between two women exactly 20 years apart, and Rebecca and Paula's gestation as friends, in a vague way, mimicked me and Aline. It started out being a much more of a mother-daughter dynamic, and now we are much more same-size spoons. And I think that other thing of friendship is, looking at who you are inside doesn't mean isolate yourself. It's find other people who can help you be the best version of yourself. Find other people who understand you and make you happy. In addition to it being a television show, and it would be boring for the character to have no friends.
Yeah, that would be a really terrible show to watch, but that's a whole other story. Speaking about some of the really fun stuff about the show, the musical numbers, everybody always wants to talk about them because, I mean, obviously they are one of the highlights. And if people don't quite realize, most of them are a tribute or a satire on something. Like, for example, After Everything I've Done for You was kind of like Gypsy, and one of my favorites, Don't Be a Lawyer, is kind of like, to me, it was like a Belle Biv DeVoe 1990s R&B video. It was just so well done. What was the most difficult musical number for you to get right and put together?
Well, we did 157 songs.
That's a lot.
So I'm trying to go through them. I mean, honestly, the last song, so we made a documentary about the making of the series finale and our general process that you can find on CW called Oh My God, I Think It's Over, which is a parody of one of our own songs called Oh My God, I Think I Like You. And the last musical number we ever did on the show, it's what in musical theater you called an 11 o'clock number, which is this kind of character taking all of the things they've learned and kind of tearing down the curtains and saying, who am I? What am I? And it's called 11 o'clock, literally. And it's set on a giant turntable that becomes a clock. And usually we get 8 days. We had 8 days for a finale. For the series finale, we filmed it in 7. I became quite sick during the filming of that finale, and we just didn't have time to plan out that musical number the way we wanted. So the way we shot it, it was kind of like jazz. It was very on our feet. It was very, we had these plans, but then actually seeing how the turntable worked, how we changed up the plans. And it was so the culmination of us working together for 4 years. We could not have worked that way off the cuff in season 1 or even season 2. It took us 4 seasons of Aline directing, me imagining how it would go in the edit, because I kind of supervised the edit of all of the musical numbers. Jack Dolgen, who is my songwriting partner, who'd also directed, understanding all of those elements, and then Catherine Burns, our choreographer, having a feel for that. So you see in the documentary, everyone is weighing in, and it really was the culmination of 4 years of becoming experts in something that we might never have to use again, in skills we might never have to use again.
Yeah, it's probably the case. And I remember when I spoke to you a few years ago, I tried to squeeze out of you what your favorite song from the show of all time is. I'm not going to make you do that again because it's a Sophie's choice. You said they were all your babies.
Yes.
So that's probably how you feel now. But there are some real highlights, like Sexy Getting Ready song is really old now. It's been, you did that a while ago, and I still think it works. It's very funny. I love the one about the antidepressants not being a big deal. Such a great tribute to La La Land. It was just so well put together. There's so many. There are just so many of the songs. Is there any, can you say, without saying one of your favorites, but maybe of this final season, apart from 11 o'clock, was there any in particular that you thought perhaps maybe wasn't going to work or something, and then it came out and you were just super proud of it?
Say that again. Sorry, my phone rang and I forgot.
Are there any that you would say that you were maybe not sure if they were going to work, or they were really challenging to put together, and then when it came out, you were super proud of it?
Yeah. God, a lot. Hello, Nice to Meet You, which is when we reintroduced this character of Greg. I originally pictured it as kind of a waltzy ballad. And then Aline was like, oh, I was pictured as kind of an up-tempo thing. And so that was a kind of, for me, reimagining of that song. And then we wrote the script. And by the time we got to filming it, I was like, I hope this works. I mean, that's the problem, is when you think about a song a lot and then you rearrange the way you think of it, or you generally rearrange the script a lot, there is a certain point where you lose perspective, and you just have to trust that it's all there, that the impulse was always there, that the technique is there, and that you also have other people around you who are like, this is good. And then we got into editing. I was like, oh, thank God it works. I mean, it's kind of, you don't know until you get into editing. A diagnosis, it was scary because I thought the set was going to be much bigger so that I could really, Maria from Sound of Music down the hall, and it was tiny because we didn't have a lot of money as a show. So I got to set that day, and I kind of had to take some extra time myself being on the set to see how I would do this number, to really, really block it out, and also internally take in, okay, how do we lean in? Because the number also is kind of this musical theater. There is a musical theater cheesiness to it, because the character thinks she's in this moment of chirpy, peppy musical theater revelatory space. And so it was always that fine line of, we're commenting on the fact it's cheesy. The character is in a little moment of delusion, but also she's in a moment of clarity. And it was scary because it's also an emotionally vulnerable song. And I think for me, the songs in the writing and both the acting where I felt incredibly vulnerable, where the joke was there, but not the only thing on the table, were scariest for me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then the flip side is a song like Don't Be a Lawyer, which just kills me because I am a lawyer. And when that came out, I remember I emailed it to every colleague that I had ever worked with. And I was like, you need to watch this because it's the truth. Don't be, that's a whole other story. So the other thing I was going to ask you about was diversity, because a lot of people talk about it. They kind of, it's a talking point, and it's sometimes a bit tokenistic. But if people kind of explored what you guys did on this show, I think that this is an example of really trying to show a bit of diversity in the cast. You contributed to that conversation. Are you proud of that part of the show?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was always just reflective of what Southern California is, and then also what haven't we seen on TV before. So I've seen a white surfer bro on TV. I have, you know, that character didn't interest me. What interested me was bros of Asian American, Asian American bros, the kind of guys that I grew up with, because I grew up in Southern California, that I hadn't seen on TV. That was an interesting. That was just an interesting character I hadn't seen before, because our culture and our race and our background does define us. And case in point, that Thanksgiving episode when she's sucking up to his family, it's made so much more interesting by the fact that his culture is so different from hers. And this is a character who tells herself stories. So Jewish upbringing, single mom, not a close family, comes into this large, warm Filipino family. She learns the foods. She tries to be Filipino. It's just more interesting. So I think that diversity for us meant being, just reflective and interesting. I mean, I still think we could have gone further. Like, I don't think that we were perfect. But we're very proud. And I think that it's telling that a show with a white protagonist, and two of the love interests being white is still heralded for being diverse, which we should be, but that just shows how far we have to go.
Yeah.
That the bar does seem low.
Yeah, it is. It's 100% right. I was also wondering, this is a general question. I hope that you can kind of humor me, but what's the most rewarding thing that you'll take away from your time on this show? So 10 years time, you look back, is there something that you'll hold on to and just say, look, that was special?
It really changed. Everything really, really changed in the middle of season 3 when we diagnosed the character. The mental health component, the destigmatizing, getting into therapy, showing Josh Chan getting into therapy, and the ways that it's affected people. It's a new generation. I mean, at the live shows have really impacted me, because you have the TV show, and then I do these live shows where I meet the fans. And the songs take on a new meaning. A diagnosis becomes more sincere when I'm singing it in front of people who I know a lot of them have BPD. Some of them have tried to commit suicide. That song, just by its nature, gets more earnest, and it takes on a new life. So I'm really proud of what we did, and hearing that we had a direct impact on people's lives, hearing that like people went into therapy because of us, that they're making their lives better because of us, that they're happier. Personality disorders weren't even talked about. I mean, borderline, I don't think was even in the DSM until, I want to say, the late 80s, early 90s. And so this really is a new conversation, and running into the amount of people that I run into who say, I have depression, or I have borderline, and I'm currently in DBT therapy, and I'm reading these books, and thank you. It's just, there is a level of self-betterment and self-awareness that previous generations have not had. And the fact that we have, in a small way, contributed to that giant shift in the perception of making yourself happier, that is profound.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And finally, given everything that you've accomplished and where you began on YouTube, do you often take stock of where you are now, and also what's next for you?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's, when I was at Radio City, I did Radio City and then the Palladium in London, and I sat for a second. It's when I saw my name on the Radio City Music Hall marquee, actually, and I thought, this is a parody of the career I dreamed of having. I mean, if you told me that I'd be going up at Radio City for a musical television show that I co-created and starred in, that both used musical sketch comedy to explore stereotypes and all of the nuances of mental health, that's like something you write in your journal. You know, that's like fan fiction about your own life. So I'm immensely grateful and constantly overwhelmed. And you know, what's next is interesting because when is this interview going on?
Like in 2 days.
So I'll just say I'm about to launch like a new kind of mini live tour that I'm gonna call the what do I do next with my life, or what do I do with my life now tour, because there is something to the fact that I, for the past 4 years, have been working on this bucket list project. And now it's like, there are a lot of things on the table, a lot of irons in the fire, probably some press releases in the next couple months you'll hear about. But I think that for years I said, when you asked me what's your dream, I would have said a musical television show that I created and starred in about X, Y, and Z, and that happened. And it's such it's nuts. It's nuts that happened. It's crazy.
Yeah, it sure is. And on that note, thank you so much for your time, Rachel, and congrats on a great final season of a really great show.
Thank you so much. It was great talking to you.
Now, to all Crazy Ex-Girlfriend fans, go to Gold Derby, make your predictions, compete against know-it-alls like me, and don't forget to subscribe because there's lots of interviews with people just like Rachel.